So greetings. My name is Rafael Ruiz from Kinokuniya bookstores in New York City, and today we have the great honor of speaking with Michelle Zauner.
Hello.
Michelle Zauner is best known as a singer and guitarist who creates dreamy, shoegazing-inspired indie pop under the name Japanese Breakfast. She has won acclaim from major music outlets around the world for releases like Psychopomp and Soft Sounds from Another Planet. She is the author of her new memoir, Crying in H Mart. This was also the title of an essay she wrote for The New Yorker, which went viral in 2018. Recently, Michelle has performed on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, performing her songs Jimmy Fallon Big, as well as Big Be Sweet. So Michelle Zauner, thank you very much for agreeing to meet with us today, and how are you today?
I'm doing great.
So first, I just want to start by saying congratulations. I noticed that your book has just made it on the New York Times bestsellers list, and so you deserve every bit of that. I mean, I just finished reading your book, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I haven't cried reading the book in a very, very long time. But when you're writing, how does it feel knowing that you are now also, including on all your accomplishments, a New York Times bestselling author? How does that feel?
It feels very surreal and momentous, like a momentous moment in my life. And yeah, I cried a lot yesterday and celebrated very hard, and I'm very, very proud of myself, and it felt like just a wonderful gift. It's still sinking in, honestly.
Still, yeah, because you found out yesterday, right?
I found out yesterday. Yeah, my whole publishing team surprised me on a Zoom that I thought was like a tech call. And so I thought I was doing a tech call for a bookstore event, and they all came on to the Zoom with the list, and I just like lost it, just like cried so much because it felt like, like I'd worked so hard on this book, and I had, really just endured so much agony during the time of writing it, what the book is about, that it felt like such a full circle moment where I could just, put that experience to bed in a big way. So it was I was more emotional than I thought I would about it.
I mean, that was just a great thing to see when you posted that. I was like, yay. So I just want to say, and this might require a little bit of oversimplification, but what do you want or hope readers gain from picking up your memoir?
Some of my favorite feedback has been like, I read your book, I cried, I called my mother to have lunch with her, and so I mean, that to me is the best thing. I had another girl write to me and said, my mom keeps taking pictures of passages from the book and saying, it's just like us. And I really have loved that reaction, and am excited for more people to feel and see themselves in the book in some way.
I called my mother right after reading the book too, so I definitely understand that. So the H Mart, from the title, Crying in H Mart, was a Korean specialty supermarket. So obviously food is a very important aspect of your memoir. Can you describe why food is such an important part of your book?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of reasons, but one of them was that it sparked a really happy memory of my mother that I wasn't able to access for a long time, because I was really kind of scarred and traumatized by the caretaking experience, and I really struggled to remember my mother for some time before she was sick. And it was only when I started going to H Mart that I started, seeing these different types of dishes and groceries and ingredients that sort of reminded me of different parts of my life and my childhood, and these really pleasant images of my mother before illness had entered our lives, that I found it to be this wonderful refuge to kind of revel in my past in a way. And so it became this really important place for me because of that.
And would you say that is what brought you to start writing the book in the first place, and to hold on to the memory? Like what sparked you wanting to sit down and actually start writing like a memoir in this way?
It happened in sort of like stages. The first essay that I wrote was in 2016 for Glamour magazine, and it was about my relationship with Mangchi, who's a Korean YouTube vlogger. And by extension, because I was cooking with Mangchi and she was helping me, like unbeknownst to her through this really difficult time in my life, I just thought it was a really cute story. And then I started going to H Mart all the time to get these ingredients, and that sort of bred like this new story of like this other kind of ode. And then through doing that, I just realized that there was so much more of a story to tell, and I was getting, you know, all this encouragement to like dive deeper and explore that. And part of what made me really want to write it is like getting to sort of relive some of the happier times between my mom and I, and sort of, you know, remember these really beautiful parts of my childhood I hadn't really thought about for a while. So that was part of what was really enticing, and also to just like investigate what had happened during this really difficult time that, you know, it was just a real whirlwind of events for 6 months when she was sick and when she passed away. And so I just kind of wanted to like go back to that and sort of figure out what happened and how that might have impacted me.
So, as you mentioned, obviously your memoir is highly involved with your mother, tragic loss of your mother, of course, and the memories of your Korean heritage. And also, it seems like in the book you were almost trying to figure out like there's like an American way of looking at the world, and there's like a Korean way of looking at the world, and trying to, how you like fit in both of those. How do you feel in that now? Like,
yeah, it's funny because I have some mixed race friends or friends with mixed race children who have said things along the lines of, you know, I'm not half Korean, I'm not half American, I'm full Korean, I'm full American, or whole of both of these parts. But I actually feel like so much of my identity is actually this feeling of not quite belonging in either of those worlds, and that's like a really big part of like the mixed race identity in my feeling, is that you're like kind of like a cultural vagabond. And so I think for me that was like a really interesting thing to explore, and I think a natural reason why I became so interested in making art, because I wanted so desperately to experience like understanding and a sense of belonging, that I think I needed to sort of like create that for myself. And so much of creating that sense of belonging came from, you know, making art and or finding myself on a stage where I belonged fully to that environment.
So while you were writing the book, obviously thinking back in your childhood and your history, you must have gained a lot of like insight into like who you are as a person, and just like a lot of revelations of like who you are. Was there anything really surprising that you've never thought of before actually sitting down to write the book about yourself that you've discovered in that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I recognize that I'm more like my mother than I thought, you know. I always like, I'm a very impatient person and very intense, aggressive person, and I always related to my father very much growing up. I felt like we had similar temperaments and personalities, much more than my mom, who was more sort of stoic and patient and could be withholding. And then I think through investigating this, I realized a lot about her character and our similarities in a way. Yeah, and I think I also uncovered, you know, like I was so curious why I did lean into food beyond, obviously it was like a major connection between my mom and I, and so much of the way that she shared her culture with me. But I think I also recognized that part of the reason why I might have started learning how to cook Korean food was this sort of psychological undoing of the sense of failure that I felt like I confronted when I was living with her as a caretaker, because I really struggled to figure out like how to cook for her, and how to, you know, because a lot of the Korean dishes that I grew up eating were very flavorful and spicy and vibrant and scalding hot, and you just can't eat those things when you're going through chemotherapy. And so I was at a real loss of how to care for a Korean person who is sick, you know. And that was really hard for me. And I think so much of why I started cooking Korean food was like trying to forgive myself in some ways for the guilt that I felt for maybe not rising to that occasion in the way that I wish I could have.
So is making Korean food something you still do regularly? I know in the memoir you mentioned making kimchi basically from scratch. Is that something you still do?
I do that occasionally. I've been so busy that I haven't.
I can imagine, yeah.
I've just been buying my kimchi lately, but I do still eat Korean food very often, and I had some kimchi stew this morning, and it was very soothing.
Imagine. So you describe how your mother discovered art later in her life, and you found her art, and, like, and when you found her art, it was like a new way to get to know her. Can you talk a little bit about that? I remember I saw in the New York Times article you had it was a picture of you with a painting
Yeah.
of your mother. Oh, that right.
This pomegranate right here was one of my mom's, and then there's a strawberry up here that she did. But yeah, I mean, after my aunt passed away, her younger sister, she kind of opened up in this new interesting way and started taking these like watercolor classes, and she was like quite good at it, and it was really nice to watch her pursue something, you know, just like creative, because she never really had done that before when I was growing up. And you know, so much of the book is about me like really challenging her and questioning that, and sort of looking down at her for not having that in her life. And I think watching her sort of like, you know, for me it's like such an important part of my life that, you know, I just naturally imbued it with like so much meaning when I got to sort of rediscover her, you know, little body of, I mean, I think that she would probably think that I was being silly by like, you know, swelling it with like such importance. But, you know, for me, that's just it is like the utmost of, you know, it is who I am as a person, is how I express myself through my work. And so naturally, I think I just really attach myself to it. And, you know, as a creative person, you just are always wondering, you know, where this sort of urge comes from. And, you know, my father is not a creative man. And so I often wondered if my mom had been, you know, given the sort of privileges that I had been given growing up, or the same sense of entitlement, if she might have been more of a creative person, more interested in the arts. And so that was like me kind of investigating that when I found it. Yeah.
So your father was also with you when you were caring for your mother. I know you recently wrote an article about your relationship with your father. Can you describe a little bit about how readers have responded to the article, the one you did in I think it's Harper's Bazaar?
Yeah, you know, it's like a really complicated relationship and a complicated story. But you know, I've been really moved by some of the responses I've seen, and the reason why I wanted to share it, I guess, was because it was a very scary thing that I've never read many people explore. You know, I don't feel like I've read anything that like really explores that kind of complicated relationship and what happens after someone dies to you and your other parent. And so I was curious, like, if there would be people who would kind of come out of the woodwork and really relate to that type of story. And they really have, and it's been really interesting to see what people think about that.
I can imagine, because I know reading your book, it definitely brought in my mind of when I was caring for my father when he passed, and it just knowing that other people have gone through that and there's a way to connect to, definitely it soothes you in a way that most things can't. So it's very beautiful that you put that out there. But I want to ask, you write so beautifully, and it's like, it's really, really amazing. I know you mentioned in your memoir that you had a degree in creative writing. So was writing something you've always dreamed of doing or hoped of doing? And is there anything else you plan on putting out there work-wise?
Oh gosh. I think like for a while I need to like take it easy and just like enjoy my life and the fruits of my labor for a little bit. And I am really looking forward to just like, you know, the period of time where I'm not like constantly juggling a number of projects. And, you know, a lot of these projects sort of like come with, you know, promoting them and doing work around them. So I'm going to do that for a while and let some other ideas steep, though I do already have another idea for my next book, and I'm sure I'll write another record in due time. But yeah, what was the other question?
Was writing something you always
writing? Yeah. Was writing something that I was always interested in? Yeah, I think it was. For a long time, I thought that I needed to channel those interests into journalism, because it seemed like if you were interested in writing, the only realistic pathway for you as a writer would be to be a journalist. So I took, you know, like newspaper. I was interested in the newspaper, like the school newspaper. I was an editor for a school newspaper in middle school and high school. And then I think I realized that I have such an independent streak. I really don't like rules or bosses. So I was like too, you know, that sort of like restriction and that type of like omniscient like voice is like not really appealing to me. And I felt myself like constantly confronting that in that class. So it wasn't until college that I realized I was really just interested in creative writing, and I took a lot of short fiction classes, and I had a wonderful professor named Daniel Torday, who is also a novelist, and he just taught me so much about writing. But at the time I was also playing in bands, and you know, it seemed almost more realistic at the time that I could make it as a musician than as a writer, because you know, I understood the industry, and I understood even like, you know, how to enter into the industry of music in a way that like the publishing industry was like, it seemed so much loftier of a goal at the time. And so after college, I sort of set aside fiction writing and just pursued music for a time. And so I was just really lucky. I just had a very charmed experience with returning to writing, because I just never thought I would write nonfiction. And then as soon as I did, I, you know, won this Glamour magazine essay contest, and then I, you know, got a piece in the New Yorker, and then I got a major book deal. I mean, that is like a pretty wild trajectory in retrospect, but you know, it was it took me a while to return to that.
And I think you mentioned like in an Instagram post that when you were writing this book, you wrote pretty much everywhere when you were moving. What is one of the most interesting places you found yourself actually working on the book?
Probably in the van. You know, I was like, I mean, like I tried to write like 1,000 words a day, and a lot of times we were on tour. So, you know, we'd have a 4-hour drive from like, you know, DC to like wherever we would be going, DC to like, you know, Birmingham or something, you know, and I would just be, you know, my tour manager would be driving in the 15-passenger van. I'd be one of the, you know, in one of the rows, like on my laptop, like writing. And so I did that a lot. I wrote on planes to, you know, on tours through Asia. I wrote in a hotel room in the winter in Beijing. I wrote, you know, in coffee shops, like all over the US, like in between soundtrack and performances, in green rooms. You know, I just was always working initially. And then I took some retreats in Seoul that helped me kind of finish it off.
It's like a really, just like the writing of the book seems almost as much of a journey as pretty much as your life has been, which is really kind of awesome.
It's a long process.
So just changing gears for a moment, what do you think got you into music?
Gosh, I don't know. I just fell really hard for it, especially as a teenager. I mean, you know, I guess it's just like a cool thing to get into. And I remember being like 13, 14 and like proclaiming like, I'm going to get into music now. You know what I mean? Like, and then finding your taste, and, you know, like at that age, you just feel things really intensely, and all of your friends are feeling things really intensely, and you're trading like Modest Mouse and Death Cab, you know, compilation discs. And I mean, I just fell really hard in love with it, and I became obsessed with like everything, not just musicians, but you know, booking agencies and labels, and making flyers and playing open mics and booking shows, and that whole lifestyle was just really enchanting, and I became just completely obsessed with it.
So your musical moniker is Japanese Breakfast, which seems interesting considering your Korean heritage. How did you choose that name?
Yeah, I mean, it's just really stupid in retrospect. I was like, it was before my mom passed away. It was before I started writing so much about Korean culture and food. And, you know, it was a side project that I never really anticipated going anywhere. And I had a Tumblr, and I was uploading demos with like animated GIFs of food. And one of them was like this beautiful animated GIF of Japanese breakfast. And I just thought, you know, that is like such a soothing, comforting image that I want people to like wonder what is a Japanese breakfast, and you know, this is what they get to discover.
So wanted to throw in, if after hearing all this, someone is still on the fence of whether or not to pick up the memoir or not, how would you pitch it to them?
I would say that it is about, it's a story about mothers and daughters. It's about grief. It's about learning how to cook Korean food in the wake of loss as a way to preserve my mother's memory and our shared culture.
It's very beautiful. And it was a beautiful book. I just have to keep saying that because it was
Thank
so true.
you so much. Thank you.
And finally, would you be willing to read for us a passage from Crying in H Mart?
Yeah, I was not prepared for that, but let's see if I can find a good one. Maybe I'll read from the second. Okay. Is 2 pages okay?
However long. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Or whatever's comfortable for you.
Maybe I'll just do 1 page. What I never seem to forget is what my mother ate. She was a woman of many usuals. Half a patty melt on rye with a side of steak fries to share at the Terrace Cafe after a day of shopping. An unsweetened iced tea with half a packet of Splenda, which she would insist she'd never use on anything else. Minestrone she'd order steamy hot, not steaming hot, with extra broth from the Olive Garden. On special occasions, half a dozen oysters on the half shell with a champagne mignonette and steamy hot French onion soup from Jake's in Portland. She was maybe the only person in the world who would request steamy hot fries from a McDonald's drive-thru in earnest. Jampong, spicy seafood noodle soup with extra vegetables from Cafe Seoul, which she always called Seoul Cafe, transposing the syntax of her native tongue. She loved roasted chestnuts in the winter, though they gave her horrible gas. She liked salted peanuts with light beer. She drank 2 glasses of Chardonnay almost every day, but would get sick if she had a third. She ate spicy pickled peppers with pizza. At Mexican restaurants, she ordered finely chopped jalapenos on the side. She ordered dressings on the side. She hated cilantro, avocados, and bell peppers. She was allergic to celery. She rarely ate sweets, with the exception of the occasional pint of strawberry Haagen-Dazs, a bag of tangerine jelly beans, 1 or 2 seized chocolate truffles around Christmas time, and a blueberry cheesecake on her birthday. She rarely snacked or took breakfast. She had a salty hand. I remember these things clearly because that was how my mother loved you, not through white lies and constant verbal affirmation, but in subtle observations of what brought you joy, pocketed away to make you feel comforted and cared for without even realizing it. She remembered if you liked your stews with extra broth, if you were sensitive to spice, if you hated tomatoes, if you didn't eat seafood, if you had a large appetite. She remembered which banchan side dish you emptied first, so the next time you were over, it'd be set with a heaping double portion, served alongside the various other preferences that made you, you.
That was beautiful. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for that. You think you ever be able to come visit our store and sign some copies for us?
I would love to. I absolutely love your store and could spend hours browsing it. So I would love to come by and sign books at any point in time.
Well, they'll be here for you whenever you're ready for that.
Great.
So I wanted to say thank you so very much for taking time out of what I'm sure is a insane schedule to speak with us. It's been truly a pleasure. And like I said before, I loved your book. I love your music. It's just amazing. I'm looking forward to what else you continue to put out there.
Thank you so much. We'll have to arrange a time for me to stop by because I would love to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Crying in H Mart is published by Knopf Publishing, available now in hardcover, and we will leave a link for purchase in the description box below, which is available now. So once again, thank you very much for spending time with us, Michelle. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Bye.